So in this slideshow, we'll be looking at flexibility and stretching. Flexibility itself is the ability to move the joints through their entire range of motion. Now, a lot of clients that you will come across will actually have poor levels of flexibility due to the fact that they lead sedentary lifestyles. So either they're sedentary at home or they are sedentary within their jobs. Now, if you are inflexible, this can lead to a number of issues. One, obviously, you're at a greater risk of muscle or joint injury. It's also going to have a negative effect on your posture, and also the efficiency and ability for a muscle to contract may be diminished. Now, there are a number of limiting factors to our flexibility. Obviously, everyone considers muscles to be a major one, but all the other structures of the body can play a role in our flexibility, including the structure of the joint, the tendons, the ligaments, the joint capsules, the nerves, and especially the fascia around the muscle. Now, usually your flexibility will decrease with age. It doesn't necessarily have to, but if you want to maintain the same level of flexibility, you just have to do more stretching to ensure that you can maintain it. With injury, our body goes into a safety mechanism that basically restricts the movement around the area that is injured to ensure that it can recover properly. And with inactivity, our body will become less flexible. Now, there are a number of different types of stretches. Static stretching is generally the one most people refer to when they actually refer to stretching. And this is when you take the joint to its range of motion and hold it in a comfortable position for usually somewhere between 10 to 30 seconds. Now, static stretching is generally considered to be overused within our stretching. Although it is still an effective means of increasing flexibility, it generally is less effective than dynamic stretching, especially for functional type movements. Now, when we do perform a static stretch, we're actually not stretching the muscle for around the first 6 to 10 seconds of the stretch. What actually occurs is that when we do stretch a muscle, we get a safety mechanism that takes place, and this is caused by a signal sent by the muscle spindle cell. There's a reflex reaction that occurs from this that sends a signal down to the muscle to cause it to contract, and this is so that we don't overstretch the muscle. Now, once that occurs, we also get another signal being sent. This is sent from a thing called the Golgi tendon organ that sits in the tendon, and it registers the change in tension. It will send a message via the spinal cord to the brain. The brain will then determine that there is no risk from this stretch, and then will send a signal back to the muscle to stop it contracting. This then obviously allows the muscle to lengthen and stretch. So therefore, we must make sure that our clients do stretch for a minimum of 10 seconds to ensure they get the maximum benefit from their stretch. Dynamic stretching is when we continuously take the joint through a challenging but comfortable range of motion, and this is something that we'll repeat usually around 10 or 12 times. It's seen as being a preferred method of stretching for warm-ups, but these days we're also using it a lot in cool-downs, as research is showing us that there is an array of functional benefits relating to sports and activities of daily living. With passive stretching, you're using a sort of outside assistance to help you achieve the stretch. Now, this can take the form of body weight, straps, gravity, other people, or other stretching devices. When you do a passive stretch, the muscle that you're stretching is in a relaxed position, and you're using the external force to take you through the stretch. Now, because we are using external forces, that does put us at an increased risk of injury, because we don't want to apply a level of force that is stronger than the muscle is in terms of its level of flexibility. So this is something we always have to be careful with when performing these stretches. Now, with active stretching, we're using the contraction of a muscle to stretch the opposing muscle. Now, this uses a principle called reciprocal inhibition, where when you actually contract a muscle, the muscle on the opposing side tends to relax. So we don't use any body weight straps. All we're using with this one is we're using the ability of the muscle to contract and therefore stretch the opposing muscle. It can be a challenging way to stretch, but it's generally considered to be fairly low risk. So in putting each of these variables together, you can see that we can form a range of different stretches. So we can have static stretches that are passive, or we can have dynamic stretches that are passive. And on the other hand, we can have static active stretches and also dynamic active stretches. And each of these can be used as a different way of actually increasing flexibility in your individual. So in the end, which stretch should you do? Most commonly, we believe that you should use a combination of different stretches because each stretch does have a benefit in terms of increasing your level of flexibility. But most experts these days say we should lean towards more dynamic active stretches because these give us a better functional level of flexibility. So when do we stretch? Now, we definitely should be stretching at the end of the workout, either to maintain our level of flexibility or try and improve it. In regards to the warm-up, it's not quite as clear-cut though. Research is suggesting these days that if we're using static passive stretching within our warm-ups, that this not only has no benefit, but we may be even at a higher rate of injury. So generally these days we wouldn't do static passive stretching as part of our warm-up. We can though do dynamic stretching or active range of movement drills to ensure that the body is warmed up and taken through its full range of motion. So how often should we stretch? Now, we should stretch a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week, and ideally after every time we exercise we should be doing some stretching. So if you are exercising 3 times a week and you're stretching at the end of each training session, then that's enough. If you're only exercising 1 to 2 times per week, then maybe an extra stretch session would be beneficial. It is possible to injure yourself while stretching, so you still should take care when going through the exercises. When you are stretching, you should not be taking to a point where the breathing is strained or you're stopping breathing. You should also not feel any pain as a result of a stretch. You should try and do them in a fairly relaxed state, and you shouldn't do it without any bouncing. You definitely should not be overstretching your clients. On average, your stretch should take around about 15 to 30 seconds, but this can change depending upon the level of flexibility of the client and what you're trying to achieve. Now, as I already suggested, we should be using a range of different stretches when we are stretching our clients. One thing that we haven't mentioned is the fact that you can actually use a warm-up stretch as a dynamic stretch when doing resistance training. Just a couple of extra pointers to finish off. We want to make sure that the body is actually warm before we stretch. This just reduces the risk of injury. If you are going to do static stretches, you want to make sure you hold it until the tension subsides. So as we discussed before, that takes about the first 6 to 10 seconds. After that point, it's also a good idea to increase the level of the stretch and breathe out as you do, as this will allow you to fall into the stretch a little bit further. If you are less flexible on one side, it's okay to stretch one side twice as much as the other. If you're going to do it though, you should alternate sides. So if the left side is the tightest, start on the left, move to the right, then back to the left. And lastly, when designing a program, you should look for areas of tension or tightness within your clients and design the stretching program based upon that.